I'm not talking about cars and shopping trolleys. Because we all know they exist. And I don't want to condone that, although I have caught some nice snapper from some shopping trolleys. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Deep Drop, a fishing podcast that asks some tricky questions and answers in a way that, I don't know, it's just our opinion. I'm Luke McCredden, and with me, as always, Adam Ring. Adam, we have a bit of a go.
We have a crack.
We try and make some sense of whatever we're about to answer, but I don't think we should muck around. I think we should just jump on in and have a go.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Is buying a kayak more appealing now with current fuel prices through the roof?
Well, it's a good question, Adam, and we should just, I suppose, kick off before we really dive in and reference the fact that fuel prices have jumped all over the place for the last few years. So at the time of recording this, late 2022, petrol, I suppose on average around the place at the moment is around $1.90 in Victoria, and I think similar up into New South Wales. So which is a fairly expensive price point at the moment. I'm hoping that someone in a few years listens to this in the future and goes, Jesus, it was expensive. It's only 80 cents now.
How good would that be? Surely someone listens to it at some point and goes, oh, I remember that.
Yeah, or they listen to it and go, geez, that was cheap, which is frightening.
Yeah,
as well.
I hope not.
But it is an interesting one, and let's be honest, the cost of fuel has been the topic of many conversations around not just the fishing and boating industry, but just, I mean, it's life in general. There's been a lot of commentary around, bringing it back to fishing and boating around the fact that it halting people from going out fishing, and in this question's case, does it make you lean towards buying a kayak and getting out there and not having to worry about fuel prices? It's a fair question. But at the same time, I do have to, in my personal opinion, around these conversations, it's not just exclusive to petrol ads. Everything's gone up. So it doesn't matter what you choose to do. It's an expensive exercise. However, a day out on the water now in a boat is pretty costly.
Yeah, it's unfortunately we're in unstable times. Everything's going up. Cost of living's probably the highest that I can remember seeing it, Luke, and that's not saying that it hasn't been this high or even higher before. Just the fact now that we have to do the adult thing and we're looking after our own outgoings, so you tend to pay more attention when it's your own money. But it's a great question, but ultimately, I don't think it's going to have much of a bearing on forcing or making people get into kayaks. I mean, I do fish out of a kayak. That's how I've been fishing for the last few years in particular, and I quite enjoy it, but it does have its limitations, and it's definitely something that's not for everybody. Now, maybe the younger demographic, they may head in that direction as they, scratch for every dollar, as most people are, but ultimately, I don't think it's going to push the majority of people this way. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You touched on a good point there that I think is really important, and it's the cost of accessibility. Because, when you're in a kayak, yes, you got access to some great areas and great environments and great fishing spots, but there's times that I've got no doubt that you've been in your kayak on the bay, for example, and you just go, geez, I wish I could just burn over there. I'll be there in a minute and a half, but now I'm like, I probably won't go over there because I can't be bothered, or it's simply going to take too long. So there's that. This is the thing that I've been thinking about with this question. It's the balance of, yes, it's a more costly exercise, being in a boat and paying for fuel and just ongoings in a boat, obviously, but the freedom you've got to travel, to reach destinations that you otherwise wouldn't. Look, and then I was thinking, oh no, but maybe in a river, kayaks are equally accessible to the spots, but you're not, because if you think about where you can travel to in an estuary system in a boat in a day, there is no way in hell you can reach that distance or cover that distance in a kayak. So my mind keeps going back to, okay, if it's going to cost you ... amount a day in a boat, do you think that is the value of what, getting to where you're going and at the speed you're going, covering more ground, is that dollar amount worth doing that as opposed to being a kayak, which is costing you nothing to run, but you're very, very limited on where you can go?
Yeah, and I think that's always been the argument to and for kayaks, as we saw the big boom of kayaks basically becoming little boats, really, with what they can do. But I think, Luke, you're spot on. If you have a look at what it's like here in and around Melbourne, the bays, they dominate everything. Port Phillip Bay and Western Port, they dominate the majority of the fishing, where at the time of recording this, we're just coming into snapper season. And as much as I love going for a paddle out in the bay in a kayak, it's not the most efficient way to catch a snapper or a whiting. And not to mention, it is so busy. Like, it's ridiculously busy out on the bay, and it comes down to safety as well in a kayak. And there's a lot of kayaks that are capable of going out to 14, 15, 16 metres and beyond if you want to. But the fact of the matter is, when there's 4 to 7 metre boats cruising past, if there's a little bit of chop on the water, they're just not going to see you. So It becomes a little bit of that as well. But for the sake of the question on will current fuel prices push more people towards kayaks, ultimately, I don't think they will.
No, it's a no from me too, Ads. And I think the other element of that is kayak prices aren't going down.
No, that's exactly right.
Seen
Still
the
cheaper.
price tag on some of them lately?
Still cheaper than some boats.
Yeah, but
they are getting up there.
Yeah, and such is everything at the moment, and that's the other part of it. It's like, again, as we're responsible adults now, Adam, we do things like we take the kids out for a day out at the movies and do whatever. Mate, you come back from a day out with the kids and you've just burned a few $100 without even thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
And that's without paying for any fuel to get there.
That's right. No, I think we're both sitting on the same sort of page here, which doesn't always happen, Ads. We've gone opposite directions sometimes, you and I, but I'm comfortable saying no. I don't think it'll be making people go down the kayak path over fuel.
Are circle hooks actually better for catching?
Luke, if I had 50 cents, the amount of times I've been asked this question over my time when I was working in a tackle shop, I reckon I could have retired a few times over. Are circle hooks actually better for catching? And I hate answering this way, but I'm going to, because it all depends on circumstance. But let's just take the most popular form of fishing in Melbourne for snapper, whiting. I'm going to say I don't necessarily think they are. I definitely understand their benefit, and I definitely understand when you would use them. But every single time I go snapper fishing or whiting fishing for that matter, they're never the first hook I tie on. I think they come into their own in deeper water. If you're deep dropping for anything, if you're in any more than 20 metres of water, 30 metres of water where striking becomes difficult, then circle hooks all the way. I think there's definitely a purpose for it. But I'm not going to say, I'm not prepared to say that they're better for catching. I would still much prefer to use something that when I see a bite, I want to strike. It's just the way I was brought up fishing. It's the way I feel more comfortable with. And I draw on an experience I had with one of our very good friends, Luke and Mitch Chapman.
Not my friend, mate.
Yeah, your mate. We went whiting fishing quite a few years back, and he was using a long shank hook at the time, and I was using a circle hook, and I just watched him pole in 3 or 4 fish to one because it was the indecision on my behalf. I could see the bite, I could feel the bite, and I didn't know whether to strike. I didn't know whether to let it go. They weren't hitting so hard that the rod was loading immediately, and the second I changed back to a J-style hook, The second I felt a bite and could strike, we were going 1-for-1. So, listen, my answer could be based on a bad experience or an experience where they weren't necessarily the best, because I know heaps of anglers that swear by them for snapper and gummies and that sort of thing. I just can't wrap my little brain around it, Luke. That's the honest truth.
No, that's fair enough. And this is why we love fishing so much, is so much of it is opinion-based and what you're comfortable with and you're confident with. And I've always said it, and thinking back many, many moons, Adam, when we were once working in a shop together, I used to say it to people all the time. It's, what colour lure should I get? Well, what are you confident with? Because that ultimately is what'll help. It's an interesting one, because I think the circle hook thing, you almost have to break it down into species a bit, and I know you've done so there, and I tend to agree with you with things like snapper and whiting. I think there's something to be said for, look, I think in game fishing circles, pardon the pun, game fishing circles, circle hooks, I didn't even mean that, I'll take it. Circle hooks are what is used collectively almost around the globe. And look, we should say too, and I think a lot of the reasoning behind people using them, and game fishing is a perfect example for things like marlin and that sort of thing, is the release. And there's no doubt in my mind that circle hooks have a better mouth hookup, giving you the ability to release fish a lot easier. And I think that's proven over the years, whether it's scientifically or not. It's certainly something that tends to be fairly accurate, whether you're fishing for bream using a peeled prawn or a marlin with a live bait. I think the release rate is a lot higher, and I think that's probably actually, I don't know, is that one of the reasons they were invented? Yeah,
I think they originally come from longliners and pro fishermen using them.
Yeah,
so that
probably
they could release bycatch if need be.
No, I think you might be right, but it certainly seems like in recreational fishing a great option for that sort of thing. Let's be honest. Going back to your point, you're fishing for whiting, mate. You're not releasing them.
100%. The only way you're releasing it is if it's undersized.
But I think turning back to my original point of breaking it down into species, and I think. But we are talking about though, are they better for catching? And this is where it's very a tricky one, because, and we can only talk on experience, and you've spoken on experience for snapper and whiting, that sort of thing. I was thinking today a little bit about kingfish, and I have to say that without even thinking now, if I'm rigging a live bait, it is with a circle hook. That's just without even really thinking about it too much. And there's plenty of good live bait hooks in that J style out there, but I think, just the situation, the way they eat a live bait and the way you fish for them, it just makes sense, and they just tend to work. So I think if we have to break it down or have to give an answer based on experience, it's probably a yes for me in a lot of cases. But at the same time, there's plenty of situations like you're saying there that is a circle hook better for catching a whiting, flathead, snapper? No, probably not.
Yeah, I think the game fishing one's a great reference, because I think those fish that tend to commit quite aggressively, I think that's where circle hooks really come into their own. Something like a snapper, especially early in the season or late in the season when the bite can be really funny, and the same with a whiting. I mean, we've all had whiting sessions where they're just ever so slightly just mucking around with the squid strip or a pippy or a mussel, whatever you're using. Whereas with a kingfish, it's either going to eat it or it's not. It might sit there and harass it and muck around and let you see it, and it'll headbutt it a couple of times, but it's not necessarily trying to eat it. Once it commits, it's done. So that the circle hook has got prime opportunity to do its thing and catch the corner of the jaw. Whereas if something's being funny and just picking away at a bait, or not quite sure if it really wants to get it down, then maybe it's not the best option. But like I said from the start, for me, it just has to come down to experience. I just haven't fished circle hooks enough to work out how to fish them, because I think to a point, your technique and your willingness to strike and that patience on when to pick it up and wind, it's all a technique thing. If you nail that, then I'm sure it's probably the best hook you've ever used in your life, because you can release undersized fish. Gut hooking doesn't become an issue majority of the time. I just haven't given it that time to hone the craft of it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I won't necessarily say it's better for catching, especially for our Melbourne-based species.
I suppose the other way of thinking about something like this is what you sort of mentioned it earlier on in this piece, is that if someone asked you, would you put them, like someone was asking you tonight about that is a beginner, about a hook for a snapper, are you turning them away from a circle hook?
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, well, there's your answer.
100%.
You are
100%.
you are
Listen,
definite.
do you know what? It might even be easier though to talk a first timer or a real like beginner to fishing. It might be easier. Like circle hooks might be a little bit easier because they don't need to time the strike. They can just leave the rod in the rod holder and wait for it to load up and off it goes. But ultimately, I would be recommending a J hook because that's, to me, that's just part of it. You identify the bite and you pick it up and you stick the hook, and that's just the way I've always felt comfortable with it.
The thing that was really difficult early on with circle hooks for me was the idea of leaving it, knowing watching yourself getting bites and leaving it. Like that was so unnatural.
Oh,
I just wanted to grab the rod and sink that hook in. I don't care whether it was a whiting or a snapper. I just wanted to drive that hook into its mouth.
Yes, it's the best part of bait fishing, if you ask me. I love it.
Well, look, this is a bad answer because this isn't what we're about, but I'm on the fence because I think there's situations that I just think they actually are better for catching, and I also think there's situations they're not. So shoot me, whatever.
Yeah, well, this one solely, it literally does, this question comes down to personal preference. It really does, because I'm sure it would be a 50-50 split between people that swear by circle hooks and those that would prefer to fish a traditional J or suicide style hook. So
this is a perfect one. This is a perfect one, ads for Instagram. Get on the Get involved. Instagram page. There'll be a tile there with this exact question: are circle hooks actually better for catching? Jump into the comments. Doesn't matter whether you're listening to this 5 years down the track. Jump in there and let us know. Yeah,
because I'm willing to say on record, no, they're not better for catching. But I'd love to be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, good work. Righto. Well, let's hear those comments on Instagram.
Do you agree with man-made artificial reefs?
Well, I mean, I struggle to see a negative in this. I have not spoken to you about this previously, Ads, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it because I'm struggling to find a negative about man-made artificial reefs. Now, I do want to say though, I'm talking and thinking about professionally installed, by the right authorities, whether it's fisheries or parks or whatever it is that put these together. I'm not talking about cars and shopping trolleys. Because we all know they exist. And I don't want to condone that, although I have caught some nice snapper from some shopping trolleys. But we're in this instance, we're talking about environmental artificial reefs, that are professionally done. It's done properly by the government and the right people that do it. I can't see a downside. Prove me wrong if that's the side you're sitting on, Ads, but I like it.
You're 100% spot on. If it's done in a way that's environmentally friendly. So have a look at the current reefs that we've got in recent times in Port Phillip Bay. So Yakka Reef, Tedesco Reef and Wreck Reef, they all went in 2009. Well established, loads of growth, natural products. Like it's not, there's no detriment that can have on the bay. But the one that's going to be really interesting, Luke, earlier this year, a reef system went in down near Port Phillip Heads, particularly for kingfish. And there was a couple of reasons that the VFA did it. It's not a small structure. There's 16 huge concrete pyramids, basically. And it's more to try and bring the kingfish into an area that's going to keep wreck boats out of hazardous areas and getting involved in shipping channels in the RIP, which has been a problem in kingfish season over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yep.
I I can't see how this is a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. They don't just pick a spot and start dropping these structures in. Everything's done with purpose. Everything's done with scientific backing. Everything's done with structures that are not going to damage the environment. I'm with you. I cannot see a negative. I'm sure there's probably something I'm overlooking, but I cannot see a negative in this sort of project happening.
Well, this is what I sort of scratch my head at, is what am I missing? Because it baffles me to think that there'd be a negative. There probably is someone, no doubt someone's got an issue with it at some stage, because that's the world we live in now. Everyone's got an issue with something. But the thing is too, that you were just talking about bringing them and putting them in areas to get boats and traffic away from particular areas, like a shipping channel, for example. That's just smart as well, because I think a lot of people too, and there's the offshore reefs been installed inshore, in the bays and stuff. And I know New South Wales have done similar things over the years, but I think immediately everyone in the recreational fishing world think of fishing opportunities, which is great because that's ultimately what it does do. But there's more to that as well. And I think, just even habitat restoration, some of it expands beyond just the structure it is, and creates, all of a sudden, it sort of spreads and creates this new habitat. And in turn, fish reproduction, population increases with fish species and other species too, like whether it's crustaceans and mollusks and whatever it is, bait fish. Like it's helping areas that might not only need it, but also were once good and maybe lack that. Just need a bit of a boost, just need a bit of a kick up the butt to get going again. And mate, it's proven that it's been successful. And you only have to look at some of the results. VFA are a good one to jump on their socials and have a look, or their website. And there's some photos of some of the species that are down there that are all of a sudden back in areas they weren't, whether it's a kingfish or it's a leather jacket or something like that.
Yep.
Which might not seem as exciting, but ultimately it's a great sign, and it's actually a really important thing that these are working. So, without just dismissing it too easily, like, do you agree with man-made artificial reefs? Absolutely, as long as it is environmentally friendly and accepting of the area they're putting in, and then absolutely.
Yep, it's a solid yes from me, and they're not just plonking them in the middle of the bay. There is some man-made structure around that's been put there for land-based fish shows. I know the Bellarine Peninsula received one. Was either early 2022, I think, maybe even late 2021. But there's some down there. There's shellfish reefs that have been put in, which is solely done as habitat restoration.
Yeah.
They went into, one of them went into Port Phillip Bay only in 2022 some stage. So it's a big program. Listen, and it probably can be pushed overboard, but I just don't think we have. I don't think we have irresponsible fisheries management sort of situation there that are just going to go dropping all sorts of things in the bay. They're very environmentally conscious, so they should be. And I think they're definitely doing a good thing. And I'm with you, Luke. I cannot see a downside. I really can't. I cannot see a downside to it.
That's a pretty convincing yes from both of us, Ads, and that's rounding out the episode. And I would just like to say a big thank you to everyone who have jumped on board this episode and other episodes. Make sure you get back and have a listen to some of the others. And a big shout out to our special guest reading the questions tonight for us. That was Ari, my son, 7 years old at the time. Thanks, Ari. It's a lot of fun, Ads. This is just our opinion. We would love more than anything to hear your thoughts on Instagram.
Correct.
So get over the Deep Drop on Instagram and tell us. In the meantime, if you've liked what you've heard, subscribe, tell your friends, give it a bit of a share, give it a bit of love, and and hang around because there's more of this coming in the future. Thanks for listening.
Yo.